Anyway, I digress. We're going to kick things straight off into the show with the most important part.
Oh, yeah.
The Indie of the Week.
Oh.
And this week, it's a bit of the pew-pew.
Oh, this one's a doozy as well.
Yeah, I was shocked we got this far without mentioning it.
Or if we have, we're revisiting it, I guess. But there we go.
No, we were, because I went looking extensively, going,
wow,
we must have. Surely
Perfect,
we've done Knuckleduster Miniatures.
Yeah.
And the answer to that was no, you haven't, you terrible, terrible people. So Knuckleduster are all about the Wild West. Well, I say all about the Wild West. Sometimes the North Americans in the 1800s, but we'll get to that. We will get to that. The big thing is Gunfighters Ball for them, which is a Wild Westy skirmishy game. And it's an interesting set of rules to begin with. From what I've read, it was sort of more or less written out of a set of convention game rules where you'd be playing with multiple people, and you wanted games to be quick, easy to pick up, fast playing, without a ton of rules that people were worried about. And to that end, they came up with Gunfighters Ball, which plays out on a sort of a 3x3 and has very few stats to be looked at. In most cases, all you really have is how many actions your gunfighter has when they activate, and then how many bullets you have for your guns. And then they've got other things that you can add in as optional extras, but it means when you're playing, players are using 1 or 2 miniatures aside. If you want to play a 1v1 with friends, then you can play, obviously, up 6 aside yourselves, because you're still not managing a huge amount of stuff. But it's the miniatures to begin with. You can see here a whole host of factions, bad guys, scoundrels, sidekicks. We'll take a closer look through the single miniatures, because a lot of them are based on TV and film of yesteryear, or even modern day stuff. I believe the Magnificent Seven appear twice in both flavors. So looking then at the individual figures. Bum, bum, bum. There we are. Now, they do show you the renders on the big images, which is, all well and good. I know often people see these and go, but what do the actual figures look like? I've bought quite a few of the Knuckleduster miniatures.
Much like that.
And they're cast in single piece metal. So anytime you see a render, it's just cast exactly as is. Sometimes they look a little bit funny, like things are a little bit pronounced. That's because whenever you cast in metal, there's a slight shrinkage in the features. So sometimes what looks on a 3D render like a more prominent piece of a sculpt, it's not that prominent when you actually see the miniature in your hand. So I wouldn't worry about that. But starting off with the likes of these delightful characters, when you're playing your games, you've got civilians as an option. It might be baked into the core rules, actually, just not the basic rules. So whenever you start kicking off in the main street in some cow town on the Wild West, and you're shooting at him and they're shooting at you, and the bystanders are either running or screaming or getting involved or stabbing you in the back or trying to take the boots off your dead friend, you just don't know what a bystander's going to do until you skin those smoke wagons and go to town. As one man once said. So there's a terrific set of figures across the board. Ace Kilkenny is just absolutely gorgeous. For
it's
anybody.
you, Jerry. That's why I'm.
I wish I was Lemmy.
You're close enough. You're close.
Yeah, well, I'm getting there. Maybe I could just do that. Yeah. Feel mutton chops at some point. But because you're playing in the sort of the core game, the basic game, you're playing with just figures that you are naming and making stuff up about yourself. There's not a specific group or faction or stat line that you have to worry about. You can more or less pick and choose, which means if you want to do an Emilio Estevez-esque Billy the Kid with his bowler hat, actually that's based on the real Billy the Kid from that photograph, which Emilio based his dress on. the bathtub belligerent.
Respect that.
Yeah.
Always armed.
Yeah, if you're going to shoot. I think is the phrase after the guy comes in looking for him. You've got the Doc, the coward who refused to go and fight in the Second World War. Well, it was. He did. It's true.
Yeah.
Johnny Ringo, obviously played by Michael Biehn, Wyatt Earp, Kurt Russell. They're all there, and there are currently 12 pages of these, and they cross a whole slew. So if you're looking to build your town up and have blacksmith working outside the blacksmith shop, your poor shopkeeper watching his establishment being shot or beaten to pieces, or in fact, if you're a fan of things like Blazing Saddles, the entire Blazing Saddles are kicking around in here, including Mungo, and they do mounted versions of people on horses. Mungo comes mounted on an ox, riding into town as he would.
Perfect.
And they are just such a beautiful set of sculpts across the board.
I think one of the really nice things about the range is something that you mentioned earlier, where it's that mix of both the Hollywood style of Wild West character, spaghetti Western character kind of thing, and then also taking cues from their historical counterparts.
Yeah,
because it's really awesome when they do like their breakdowns on Facebook and they sort of talk about how they've chosen this particular aspect from the movie, but then they've added this bit because that's what they would have had if they were actually riding around on the frontier. So they've added bits of kit and all that kind of things, which is really nice.
And being able to have Teddy Roosevelt alongside the outlaw Juicy Wheels, which is a Clint Eastwood character I don't yet own. Which is, I think, a crying shame.
As Jerry adds to cart.
Right now, I picked up The Stranger recently, which is him from Pale Rider, because then he can go up against my Dead Man's Hand, Cogburn's Pinkertons, because that's very important to me. That I own all the things all the time. We know this.
The other thing that sometimes people look at the range and be like, oh, about proportions and scale and all that kind of thing. I'm on a slightly more, as you normally say, I think it's like heroic side of 28, I think is the way they view it. But that just means that they kind of line up with pretty much all of the other ranges that are out there, essentially. I think if you're going to be looking at some of the more, I don't know, actually, I think most of the Wild West ranges out there are pretty much in the same vein, actually.
Dead Man's Hand plastic?
Yeah, so that's pretty much what you're looking at, I think, isn't it? Yeah.
Dead Man's Hand metal?
Yeah.
Knuckleduster metal.
All perfect. There you go.
So they all match the ranges very, together. Very well.
So if you look at it and you're like, oh, what does large mean? Well, there you go. It's all fine.
Yeah. Before we jump back to the indie, I'm also going to throw out one thing about their the way that they define health in the game. So there's two types of sort of injury.
Right.
You can be sort of, bleeding out, 'tis but a scratch, flesh woundy type thing. And then you can also be seriously, one shot dead. But they do this thing where you get a set of poker chips and it's like a health bar. And you stack them up in front and you just cash your chips in. So you take 1 hit, 2 hits, 3 hits. Whenever you hit the red, it's a mortal wound. And at that point, you're starting to suffer ill effects as well. And
that's so cool.
Especially if you're playing a game with people who haven't played before, and you're just all at a table at a convention or whatever, and you're or a club, and you can look across and essentially see the health bar for every player's character, just sort of
great visual indicator.
Yeah. But then they also have, like I say, there's like it's a percentile based game, and there's a D100 chart where you roll on it about triple O to 1 is fatal, just dead. All your chips are gone. Cash them all in. Unlucky. Tell my mom I loved her. Or take a wound to your arm or end up with a wounded leg, which reduces your movement. So those are all viable things, which is really nice to see because it gives you sort of a change up as to how stuff works. There's Bushy Bill Roberts, the bounty hunter, shot in a shitter. As we all remember from Young Guns. We do. Remember they sent Charlie Sheen to go and check. Didn't work out well for him. Anyway, I am a fan of Westerns. But yeah, so the miniature range is expanding all the time. And because you don't have to worry about, like I say, factions and the like, if you're just messing around or playing club games, then fill your boots. Go with whatever you want to go with. And you can get some really nice miniatures in there that will either cover favorite films or just the sheer joy of painting cowboys.
Yeah. The other thing that you were saying earlier that's quite good as well is you said that to re-emphasize it, they do the mounted and dismounted versions of pretty much all of their like big characters. So in a game where you want to be riding around on horseback and then dismounting and shooting stuff, having the ability to just switch out the models is great. So you'll see sometimes they'll release things like the Plains Warriors mounted set, and then a month later you'll get the dismounted set as well. So it's a great little collection.
So I mean, there's the coward version of Rooster Cogburn. Obviously, there's the Kurt Russell version as well, which is much better. And then there's 7 reasons, or 6 reasons the West was wild. Isn't that the tagline for the first Young Guns? And obviously they all, have the foot version as well. When you're playing the game, you can mount and dismount and mess around. You can pick up the quick reference and a cut down version of the rules for free on the website. So, like I said, it's a percentile based game and it's tight. Oh, Lordy, she's tight. It's a 3x3 you play on generally, which means people are in and fighting very quickly because it's percentile based. And you're just really counting the number of bullets you have in your gun, unless you've got a special ability or maybe you're hired gunfighter or somebody who gets plus 10% on your roll. Point blank range is 1 inch away for a pistol, or for most things actually. So you really are up close. And then once people start firing, pistols can be fired like 3 times. So, 60% or less, maybe with modifiers, maybe without. If there's any sort of negative modifiers, it's generally like half. But you only do it once. So if somebody's behind cover and blah, 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 they played a card on you to reduce it again, you'll only do it once. You'll be down to 30%. You just roll your percentile dice. And then brawling is something similar. There's your wound chart. So there you go. All your chips for the headshot, neck, hands, so on and so forth.
That's cool.
So it uses percentile D6 and a D3 for various things. The one thing I will say I'm not a fan of is it does use D10 for movement. You get 2 actions a turn, and anybody who's ever seen me roll will know I get really annoyed whenever I move 1 inch every turn, and then somebody
rolling for movement is
panic.
never a good idea.
Never good. That would be the one thing I would either change or modify in some way. Maybe you've got 2 actions. Maybe your first one is 5 inches plus half a D10, so a D5. And then that way you're still only moving a maximum of 10, but you're moving a minimum of 6.
Yeah, that'd be a good idea.
And then your second action is just a straight D10 roll, just because watching my entire gang, posse, or crew sit at the back of the board very slow. And if you got something like, because like I said, there are optional decks and rules where you can add in bits and pieces like buffs and debuffs, so you can draw these cards that you can play on yourself or play on your opponents. And like, if all of a sudden you turn up to a gunfight and one of your guys has got a wooden leg and he's moving -2 inches, all of a sudden that's a for me, I mean, that's most of the dice rolls. He's not going to be moving. He's just going to be standing there because maybe he stuck his peg leg in a prairie hole and he's just going in a circle because he's not going forward or backwards.
He'll sit this one out. Yeah.
But it's really interesting. You've got this card draw system, so your initiative is based on a randomized card. Everybody will have a different card, and then the number of cards that you have, how quick your character is, in the deck will be specified. So most people have like 2. So let's say at the start of the game, we drew 2, 3, 4, 10 as our cards. So you put them in front of your player, and then you might have 2 of each of those cards in a deck, and you construct a deck. And when those cards are drawn, you take your actions. And when the deck is spent, then you reshuffle, and that's the end of a turn. But there's something you can do called Ace in the Hole. So that card in front of you that's reminding you what your initiative is, you can also use it to interrupt out of sequence.
Oh, yeah.
So you flip that card over, and so maybe the bank robbers come running in front of you. You flip your card, shoot them in the back. Because it's the only way to deal with bank robbers. They all knew the risks. However, it means the next time your card is drawn, you don't take an action. You just re-ready your previous card. So you're taking an action from the future to use out of sequence now to gain some advantage. So yeah, a fascinating little Western game for people who are interested in playing out these sort of smaller skirmish games. And you can see there the basic rules. So they've added on these sort of layers of extra frippery.
I love that, dude.
That you can add in or not.
Help me.
Yeah. Well, crawling's a D3 when you have been shot or you're been kneecapped. So quick drawing, going out of action. So it's worth a look to see what other bits and pieces that can be added in. So you might want to add in things like the buff and debuff deck, which is completely optional. Something you can pick up. If you don't want to play with it in your games, don't play with it in your games. There, instead of that D100 chart, there's a deck of cards that have most of them in there that you can shuffle and draw instead. And then, considering I'm always going to be rolling lots of really low, terrible numbers, they'll be headshotting all of your opponent all the time. So if I do ever finally hit, they're dead. At that point, you go, well, draw a card instead. That'll be better. They do also obviously do terrain as well. So if you haven't got your hands on any Wild Westy things, you can, there's where Brishy build out. Then you can put together your own Cowtown. Mostly laser cut MDF, but then also you can see that they've used metal casting to do detail work on some of them as well. So putting more intricate window frames and stuff in, having your saloon, your little Adobe jail.
That's the back of that's gonna come off. Just get some strong horses and some chains.
just pull it just straight through the bars in the window and away you go. Look, you can see where other nerdy worlds have attempted to blow it open and they've just got through one. Yeah. There's no point in doing that. You'll get shot in the back again.
Stop putting holes in my jail.
Always shoot people in the back all the time. So that is the westerny, the knuckly-dustery side of Knuckleduster Miniatures. But they do have another side, which is the War of 1812, which is interesting because it's one that we kind of gloss over on this side of the pond because obviously the Napoleonic Wars are running at the same state and there's a lot more people involved and there are a lot bigger battles closer to home. So whenever people think about early 19th century warfare, it generally goes towards France and what they're up to. However, there was obviously the War of 1812, so 3 years, 1812, 1814, 15. Britain was fighting on two fronts. They were fighting the Napoleonic Wars, and then they were fighting against America in the War of 1812. I'm not saying Britain started it, but they did press gang American citizens who were too far north occasionally.
I think in general, you can probably say Britain did start it. Yeah, I think it's a safe bet.
It's one of those, we want to expand further west. The Americans go, no, and then the British go, you know what, your citizens are sailors now. Laughs in British while twirling moustache. But it's a really nice set of 1812 miniatures. Obviously, the British side could be used for Napoleonics as well. But then you've got all the American. So you've got your militias and your regular army, as much as they were. And there are some really nice figures in there. So are Virginian and Colombian. So musket and shot fans, or Canadian fans. I believe there are some specific Canadian miniatures in the British section as well, which is always nice to see.
Yeah. Anybody
who's not aware of the fun that was had during the War of 1812, it's where the White House gets its name. Because the British got really annoyed, sailed up the river, burnt the White House and sailed off. And so that, because it wasn't white beforehand, but to cover up the scorched damage from the British Marines and Army, they whitewashed it, and it's been stayed that way ever since.
There we go.
So yeah. That's how you show them. I don't know who.
It's nice that they have, again, a good deep selection of stuff for you to choose from for
Yep.
this as well.
It's not what I want.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when you get into it, you've got the British infantry, obviously.
All the different flavors of
Marines,
British. Yeah.
your Canadians.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the standard stovepipe shako, very familiar to Napoleonic players, just goes right up and down. Big, nice flat hat on it. The Belgic shako, I don't know if anybody wore it particularly much in the British Army in Napoleonics. I think it was sort of skipped. Essentially, it's got a peak at the front that comes over the top of the stovepipe. So it's a very minor thing. And it wasn't worn for particularly long, but got more of an airing out in the Americas. And obviously when the Napoleon was defeated the first time, it freed up an awful lot of British troops to go across to America and reinforce that. And then when he came back for the 100 days and post because the treaty was signed then, and then not ratified, it then meant when he returned for the 100-day campaign, there was an awful lot of troops coming the other way that had been sort of carved off.
Never-ending war for those poor soldiers. Yeah. So.
And your Highlanders, for people who want to paint tartan but think painting tartan on a kilt is too much hassle, why not paint it onto trousers instead? Say to you,
even more angles for you to deal with.
Yeah. You do you, people. You do you. But yeah,
that's awesome. Really cool.
The British infantry line, obviously. I mean, we see a lot of British infantry quite often. British Marines are really nice, though. Again, because in most cases, it's the hats that sell them. So the British Marines have very distinctive hats compared to the infantry. I'm trying to find. I remember at one stage Warren was looking for the short, stocky hats of the British Marines, and I can't remember why. So really,
probably for some game that he was trying to create. I guess.
Yeah, it's possible. But who knows what he's up to? And then we have the Canadians, and the Canadians obviously
the Canucks. Yeah,
played a fair bit of it. So it's really nice to see a substantially large amount of them that can be fielded. And again, cool. When you get people, obviously regionally, obviously the Canadians will want to do stuff closer to home. You don't always want to be playing some foreign war elsewhere. So it's nice to see the range covered by them. But yeah, the Americans and the Canadians are utterly gorgeous. There is one other thing I want to point out before we disappear away from Knuckleduster, and it is the books. There's our books. So they do a couple of books. Gunfighter's Ball is the one we've mostly been talking about, which is the sort of the main one. However, Desperado is a reprint of an older game, and it's a skirmish game more based around skirmishing bands of people. The Knuckleduster edition is a reprint with some new bits added. You can still play the original from the early 90s, or there's other bits and bobs in it. It's relatively small, sort of maybe 4 or 5 man bands, but again, written with the idea that it's a simple, fast-paced game for conventions. So even though people are playing with little bands of Mexicans or outlaws or whatever, you can have a group of people. So if you're not after just one model on a tabletop per person, then Desperado might be the way to go. And then the Cowtown Creator.
Sounds amazing.
I may or may not have ordered a copy of this. It is, if you want to do a Western RPG, 250 pages of guides to what the Old West was like, period photos, floor plans, name generators, first, last, and nicknames, and all sorts of bits and bobs in there as well. Yeah. So not needed in any way, shape, or form for any of the other games. However, if you're interested in doing some Old West RPGing, then that's possibly one to have a look at.
Definitely. Yeah.
I'm going to say if you're in the UK, Abe's Books, ABES, has got the cheapest version of it on this side of the water, because that website's American. Yeah. And also, if you're in the UK, Cavalier Press carry the Knuckleduster range. So easier to get it that way than it is to get it directly from the States. If you're in the EU, I'm not sure if it's cheaper to import from America or from the UK these days.
Who
Here's your
knows?
money, take your chances. But
Yeah.
definitely, if you're interested in giving the Old West a bit of a go, it's a different game or different style of game from things like Dead Man's Hand or Legends of the Old West. I like the fact that none of the Western style games that I own overlap on each other too much. You've got like very light single character. You've got weird 3-act cinematic, and then you've got essentially Lord of the Rings, the Old West.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
So yeah, which is all character based and cheating. Yeah. But yeah, definitely worth checking out Knuckleduster just for the range of Clint Eastwood's.
Yes, it is. It is extensive.
It's fairly extensive. I want to do High Plains Drifter. Obviously, you are all aware of High Plains Drifter. I'm just going to tell people at home who aren't. So in High Plains Drifter, spoilers, by the way, for a film that came out in the 70s, he plays the ghost of a murdered sheriff who comes back to a town just before the 3 people who murdered the sheriff are due to get out of jail. They originally were working for the town, and then they double-crossed them after they killed the sheriff and sent him away. So they're all panicking. The stranger arrives. They don't realize it's the dead sheriff, and he convinces them to paint the whole town red, put out a big welcome table for them, and writes "Welcome to Hell." And I just want a board like that. Most of the buildings painted red, some of them not painted red because they didn't get far enough down the town. Little Malachi, dwarf guy, makes the sheriff and the mayor. At one point, they're giving Clint everything, and then when it looks like they're going to run rampant through the whole town, Clint comes out with a whip and just does them all over. It's great. It's an amazing film.
Sounds great.
Yeah. It is. It's excellent. It's based on, I think, the book or original script. It was meant to be the brother of the sheriff, and they don't recognize it. Clint changed that to being a bit more mystical woo-woo. You don't really know what is it the dead sheriff, is it not, kind of thing. In Clint's version, it really is just dead sheriff. Anyway, enough Western. Let's move on, take a look at some news.